Welcome, everybody. Hello. It's time to get immersed into how AI is shaping storytelling here at the Media Production Technology Show 2023. Thank you so much for choosing our session. It is the best one. Okay, I'm LJ Rich, by the way. Nice to meet you all. I'm a music artist, TV presenter, and technology nerd. I will be hosting this session and the next one with TikTok shortly afterwards, right here on this stage. And I have the unrivaled honor of introducing my guest. He's worked across stage and screen, ABBA Voyage Show, Avengers, Endgame, even The Mandalorian Season 2, everybody. So if you want to get further into AI and creativity, this is the way. Yes, I went there. Ladies and gentlemen and everybody, please welcome Chris Smith. That was a very good welcome. Okay, well done. Those of you thinking you need more coffee, go get more coffee. It's the production show. Come on. Okay, so Chris, thanks so much for coming.
No worries.
Awesome sizzle reel. Also, amazing sound system here. The bass I could really feel through the floor. So tell us about the nature of the work you do with Metaphysic.
Yeah, so I'm VFX AI producer at Metaphysic, and like you can see, what we do is basically create hyper-real media with faces, de-aging, face swaps, to basically really generate a real sense of reality in what people see, which a lot of the world these days is a lot of visual effects heavy films out there, a lot of things that don't quite get to that level of reality that we can get to and that you saw there. And it's very intuitive, the reaction that you get to it, because you're seeing real faces, real performances. And that's kind of where it sets it apart from more traditional visual effects and media production workflows.
It's very hypnotic, actually. And audience, if there are any areas of this that particularly interest you, please let us know. Head over to Slido or slido.com and the hashtag MPTS 2023. And if you choose the Keynote area, you can ask us anything, and the best questions will be answered here, live on stage with this really nice sound system. And yes, we'd love to hear from you. So Chris has this incredible CV that just sounds like someone's made it up. Like, I wish I could do this, and now I've done it. So we're talking about industrial light and magic, where you came from. I'd love to know what you learned from your time there that you bring to this role.
Yeah, well, I mean, ILM, as many people know, is one of the highest sort of regarded visual effects houses in the world, and it was an absolute pleasure. And like you said, I'm absolutely spoiled in some of the projects that I got to work on, Star Wars, Avengers, things like that. And really, every project like that, a large film that has a very sim-heavy performance like water or creatures like Jurassic World, they all have their nuanced difficulties. And every different show is like a different level of problem solving. And that's what was great, because you got your sort of gift at the end of that was amazing images. And that's one thing that's sort of amazing with Metaphysic and AI and doing hyper-real media now. It's a whole new world of a whole new set of problems to solve, and your sort of reward again is this amazing sort of very sort of you just get the feeling from the performance in such a natural way that you don't from, say, for example, a fully CG rendered face and character. There's always that little bit left that you don't quite buy. So it's great having a sort of different perspective on it, having had my time at ILM and now my time at Metaphysic. So.
I think a lot of people here work in some kind of production. Can you just stick your hand up for me, please, if you work in production, if you actually already work in production? Excellent. So you're already going to understand the nature of trying to solve a problem whilst it's still expanding, right? And so you're doing problem solving on the hoof during production.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So there's been a news story recently about de-aging Tom Hanks. I don't know if anyone's seen this, and Robin Wright in the movie Here, which has been Metaphysic's project. And I understand you've been cleared to tell us a bit more about the project than you might normally do so. So please tell us, how did it come about? How's it going? Tell us everything.
Yeah, well, I can't tell you everything, but I'll tell you as much as I can. So the premise of this film is basically we go through time. And these characters that we meet and we go on a journey with, from some of them being born through until old age. And they're all very well-known actors. We've all seen Forrest Gump. You know, we've seen Tom Hanks throughout his career. It's very hard to tell that story with someone that looks like a young version of Tom Hanks, but it isn't Tom Hanks. And so you have to do it in a way that is believable and that doesn't take you out of it. And it's been a hell of a journey because we shot the film in January through till end of March, April. And our role in the film is basically to take the principal four actors, Tom Hanks, Paul Bettany, Robin Wright, and Kelly Riley, and basically de-age them through different stages of their lives using artificial intelligence and our neural networks based on models that we've trained in-house of them at that age.
So you used references, so somebody like Tom Hanks, there's a vast data set of him aging in front of us all.
Exactly.
But for some other actors, would that be harder to do, or would you just use family pictures of them when they were younger?
Yeah, well, we did that as well for them as well. We asked the principal cast if they had any VHS recordings or anything, or any home pictures that may be useful, because I say all we have, but everything is available in the public domain that you can use to train these networks on. It's a data game, really, at the end of the day, and sort of curating that data set to make sure that you hit the age ranges that you need to, for example, is a specific problem with that, or a specific thing to solve for that film. But also generally with AI, the data that you have is the main thing, and it's an art form there, and make sure you balance the right ages so they're not too old, not too young, but also that you maintain likeness. Our faces change as we age, our ears get larger, our noses grow, and making sure that you maintain that sort of facial structure is an important part of the creative side as well. So there's a lot that goes into the front end of that to get the networks in a position that they really stay true to the likeness. And it's the hardest problem to solve, right? Everyone knows what Tom Hanks looks like when he was 20 years old. There's nowhere to hide. So yeah, I mean, across all of that. But if we were to do someone that, for example, doesn't have as much data, there's still lots you can do. Some of the angles and some of the areas where we're missing data for Tom Hanks and people like that, we can actually generate that synthetically. We can train image generators to basically run on places where we may be missing data and generate and enhance synthetic faces that we can use to pump into our data set. And then that generates more fidelity from the models at those angles or those areas where we might be losing some of the from the data sets.
Did you find that you were interacting creatively when it was, because you can probably tune the likeness of somebody to fit a particular situation or a scenario. So did you find yourself having these sort of creative conversations as opposed to it being, this is exactly how somebody would look like?
Yeah, it's amazing how, like, on a film set, as I'm sure most of you know, there are so many different departments that go into creating something before you shoot. Costume, hair and makeup, set. Basically, one thing that was clear from the beginning of production is they didn't want to have Tom Hanks as he was in Forrest Gump. The same makeup, the same hair. It's a different story. It's a different character, different time entirely. So that's something that you have to stay true to. So one of the early R&D projects that we had was to work with the makeup team to basically maintain the makeup design of the characters throughout the shoot. Because obviously the makeup that you have in the 1950s is a very different style to the 1980s. And now as well. So that is something that we had to basically try and tune so that we maintained enough of the makeup design and the color of the makeup on top of or media that we've synthesized from historic data sets. And that balance of the two to really kind of stay true to what's in the play, to give it not just a Forrest Gump in our film, but a brand new Tom Hanks as he performs there in front of you at age 21, for example.
Oh, it's fascinating. It's science, everybody. It's awesome. Actually, Robin Wright de-aged herself a long time ago. There was a very strange movie called The Congress. It was 10 years old. It was 2013. It's a lifetime in technology years, 10 years ago. And she signs a contract in this movie to be completely recorded for a Hollywood studio to reuse her forever. And so we spoke earlier. Your CEO has copyrighted himself, hasn't he? I'd love to hear a little bit more about this.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure if you've seen, but our CEO, Tom Graham, basically registered his AI likeness with the US government a couple of weeks ago. It was the first time we've ever done that. Basically to copyright your own biometric data, essentially, your own likeness. It's in a world where how many pictures are there of any individual person of you online? Probably quite a few. and that's really the data we're talking about here. And owning that yourself and legislating for ownership over that, especially with famous people who are out there a lot, people want to sort of mimic and generate things for these famous people that everybody recognizes. But really, if you're looking at yourself, we all want the same rights that celebrities have, right? So that's kind of where it goes, is creating this kind of legal ownership over your own likeness and your own imagery, so that someone can't just grab your images off the internet and synthesize your face and make you look like you're doing something that you're not. And it's a incredible world now where the ethics of that are so front and center with AI, that it's so important to start those conversations.
Yeah, wow. I could chat loads about this, but I'm aware of the time, so I'm going to go on to the next question, which is proper nerd talk now, how the de-aging process actually works, because it's in real time, isn't it? You have the older actor, and then you have the picture of the younger actor doing the scene in real time. That's like incredibly low latency, high processing we're talking. So
exactly, yeah.
How much work is done in advance? What is it? Expressions? Do you have to capture expressions, or is it just like a facial capture?
Yeah.
Tell us.
So it's very much an intrinsic facial capture, really, within the neural network. The facial expressions generate the facial performance without any need for dots or facial capture rigs. But in terms of the real time that we did on set, there are two parts of the project, basically. We had the shoot and the real time, which basically we de-aged them, the main four actors, to their ages in the film whilst they were on set. And Bob Zemeckis, as the director, had two feeds. He had the clean feed next to him in Video Village, and he had the deepfake feed. And then he could use that to assess the actors' performances during the shoot and change any performances that he may need, anything that's sort of that nuanced age levels that you kind of need to act. Tom's 60 plus. He needs to act like he's 20. And that kind of creative feedback is so valuable. And we had a stage at the beginning where they saw themselves de-aged because they play back. And it's an incredible reaction. It's very surreal seeing yourself as, like they said, that's how I see myself. But I'm now obviously 50 years old. But in your mind's eye, you see yourself as you were, 20, younger than they were, basically.
Residual self-image.
Exactly.
Did they like it, the actors? Were they into it?
It was very spooky, but I think at the beginning they were like, it was such a amazing response, and they used it. They would go to the Video Village, they would check their performances, and then they would sort of adjust. But it was amazing, and there was two different parts of that. So that's the real time. Then we have our offline models, which are much higher fidelity, run for longer, that aren't run at real time. And those are our production models that we'll use to generate the final pixels for the film. But the real time, we basically had a 2 or 3 month run up where we were basically training and adjusting these models, because they have to work they have to be quite generalized models, but they have to be light enough to run on GPUs at real time. So we shot at, the film shot at 4K, shot at 8K, but it runs at 4K, and it was at 24 FPS. So we had to make sure that our models ran at 24 FPS or higher to stay up with the latency of the camera, which was a whole technical challenge in and of itself. So we started 2 or 3 months beforehand training the models, iterating on the models themselves. And then we had sort of a 2 or 3 week prep period. We'd have an hour a day on stage, and we'd play with the lighting environments, the angles, light, dark, warm light, all the things that you want to do to prepare the actual production environment itself when the actors step in front of camera. And that was great, because we could iterate on that overnight. We could retrain the models based on the media that we pulled the previous day. And that was a very sort of cyclical process that we were very happy with by the time we got to the shoot. And then another problem we have is it's not just those people, those faces in the scene at any one time. There are more than just those guys. So you have a facial recognition computer vision problem in there as a starting step. You have to have Tom Hanks walk in front of camera and it recognize Tom Hanks, and then swap Tom Hanks. So there's multiple different levels there. And the way that we train those facial recognition models was the same way that you would train a way of de-aging of swapping yourself onto an AI model, is you basically feed it the images that you have of that person you want to recognize, and you embed the facial recognition as a first step, and then you do the de-age and the swap after that.
Did you fix the latency? Because I imagine the first time that was played out, it would have taken quite some time.
It's interesting. I mean, we shot it on Red Raptor, and initially we had a 4K feed coming out, and there's about 4, 5, 6 frame latency out of a red at 4K, which we thought was us until we went through with imaging technicians and realized that it was coming out of the camera already 6 frames late. So we then went down to 2K out of the camera, and then that was round trip. We got it down to 3 or 4 frames latency, real-time de-aging, 2 people at once.
It's impressive.
Yeah, which we were happy with.
Wow. Well, thanks so much for going into the detail. We love that sort of thing here. And I should say I'm an AI optimist, but I do want to talk about the benefits of this technology in a second. I think we also need to address the increasing worry of AI removing creativity if we're not careful. There's a lot of these stories about this, and obviously you're messing around with people as part of this incredible technology.
Yeah.
So let's chat a little bit about the ethics of it. We touched on it briefly with copywriting our image, but let's go further.
Well, ultimately, it's a consent game. Right? I was talking earlier about how many images are reviewed. It's a consent game, basically, and everything that we enter into with any talent or anybody that we do is fully consent-based. So you have the consent of that person to generate that likeness of that person for that specific reason. And I think that's the starting point. I think you have to start at an ethical level with these people, like in these talent. You can't just be like, oh, I've grabbed a load of images of somebody off the internet and here's a video that I made. We're having mic.
I think we're going to get a stick
that
mic
me?
from you. You're fading away. The machines don't want you to talk.
How's that?
That's it. Is that better, everyone? Yep. Oh,
Did
yes.
you not hear anything I said for the last 15 minutes?
I think I asked the question, and then I could hear the mic slowly cutting, and I thought, there's going to be a stick mic on the way. Here it is. So let's ask the question again.
Sure.
We're sort of briefly touching upon the idea of ethics and the nature of using AI to replace, de-age, change people, and how we can still maintain our creativity in this age of technological marvel.
Yeah, I mean, really, like I was saying, it's a consent game, basically. You have to have the consent of the people that you're entering into this creative work with. And it's amazing the creativity that you can have when you present a creative person with a new set of tools. And, I think filmmaking is very trendy. People realize that Marvel superhero films were pretty great. Everyone went to see them. How many have we seen for the last couple of years? Quite a few. And the ability to tell new stories, like the beginning of visual effects. Suddenly, there was this sort of genesis of visual effects in the early days that everybody started using because it caught a reaction of the audience. And now we're starting to see, we've seen it before, but we've seen a few, like The Irishman, de-aging well-known people is becoming sort of much more of a in-demand sort of stories in the stories that people want to tell, and giving creatives the tools to be able to tell that story in a very visceral way is I think where a lot of the demand for this is going to come. People realize I can tell a story of, I don't know, Brad Pitt or Leonardo DiCaprio as they were back in their 20s, for example. And that's going to be something that is going to open up a whole new avenue for filmmaking and for stories that people want to tell. And not just films as well, entertainment, like musical artists that can't stand on stage and perform like they used to. Like ABBA Voyage, you mentioned at the beginning there, I think we've seen the reaction to a show like ABBA Voyage conceptually, as well as visually, if anybody manages to see it. It has that effect of, I went to see that person as they were 30 or 40 years ago. And you can't really achieve that with, people who imitations are kind of, close but not quite there. And there's always this struggle in traditional visual effects with the uncanny valley, where, you have the most advanced technology, the most advanced skill sets of people that can create photoreal humans, but you're still that sort of 5% off, and you can't quite push past it. And that's, I think, the real fundamental paradigm shift with AI and our sort of hyperreal face swaps, is that it's trained on real-world data. It's trained on these images of these people that we've all seen before and are very familiar to us. It all reads as natural motion and as if they were there. And I think that's that fun. And that's without 2 years of, sculpting pores and, studies of faces and doing 3D modeling and textures and, rendering. It's without any of those steps. So the time scale in terms of producing that content is orders of magnitude smaller. And the amount of people and crew that you need to create that is, again, 10 times less. Instead of 60 animators, you can have 6 model artists training models, and you can do 45 an hour's worth of work.
I think I've got a couple of questions around this area because obviously the production process and storytelling is changing. My first one is this: I see this future where in a few years' time, we don't need any sort of new actors. You know, it's a very short step from making these avatars to just complete no human needed. I mean, you could literally press a button and generate a soap opera. So I guess one of the questions is, what can Metaphysic and other companies in this area do to maintain that human part of storytelling?
Well, I think one thing that we have to be very conscious of when we're using this technology, for example, on the HERE project, is that with such a story-driven, script-driven piece, you have to stay true to the facial performances, the expressions, the things that we all look at and identify with as human experience. The reason we go to watch stories at the cinema, you have to maintain that. And I think that's where that human input and that human acting, especially with people of the caliber of Tom Hanks, for example, you get that feeling, which, you know, like I said, that uncanny valley, you kind of lose a bit of that in translation from screen to your brain. But these face swaps that we do and this hyper-real approach, you maintain that human, because it's driven, like I said at the beginning, by human facial expressions, which really are what generate that real feeling. But in terms of the fully generated films and media, I think we're not that far off being able to create that.
I mean, certainly when it comes to music creation, there's a real struggle creating longer form music with a story. It can kind of create passable production music. I'm very much in the sort of music AI sphere, and it does seem that still humans are sort of safe for a little bit, I think, at least. And you mentioned about saving money earlier, which is obviously music to everyone's ears, speeding up production process, costing less. Apart from money, how can producers and directors benefit from using AI tech? We've got a question on Slido about AI being used to do sort of less flashy things as well as sort of face swapping in real time. So can we chat a little bit about that, how AI is helping the production process?
Yeah, I mean, well, just to touch on what I saw on set was basically because we ran our face swaps in real time, they were recorded with the daily rushes out of the camera as well. So immediately from set, the director has temps, essentially, of their film with people looking like that. Wow. It comes out of the camera with a 20-year-old Tom Hanks that you can cut the film with. That's a very different experience creatively than cutting with 60-year-old Tom Hanks and in your mind being like, oh, but he will look 20 in about 2 years' time when we finish post. So like it's a much more tactile kind of experience with coming out of your shoot with frames that you're actually going to use in the edit. And then, like I said, we have the offline models afterwards, which we then swap out to have much higher fidelity imagery. But in terms of the other uses of this technology, we're doing experiments now in a lot of using a lot of generative AI in terms of clothing, environments, sets. Really, you can tune these models to generate a lot of things that aren't even real, but you can, jump through, change people's costumes, for example. You can change the environment that they're on. So it's not just sort of the front and center faces. You can do a lot more in terms of the imagery that you get from a camera. You can train models to adjust any part of the image that you want in the background, or change it entirely.
It's very, very powerful and cool.
It is.
So we see, thank you for your Slido questions, by the way. I'm trying to sort of weave them in as I'm asking these really quite awesome, interesting technology. I'm like, this is cool. So obviously we can see technology is changing, storytelling is changing, and our audience here, they're here because they want to stay relevant in the global media and entertainment industry. The sort of people who attend are just genuinely interested in the future. So what do you think your advice would be to people who want to stay ahead of the curve?
That's a good question. Well, I think even the people at the front of the curve are barely at the front of the curve, I think, is the reality with AI as it stands right now. It is so bleeding edge that, a month is a long time. But there's a huge amount of resources out there and papers that come out, monthly and weekly on new advancements. I mean, an example was 6 months earlier, we wouldn't have had the graphics cards and the hardware to be able to run the models at 24 frames per second. So I think really being anywhere near the precipice of these sort of generative media generation tools. Basically, that's the best thing you can do, I think. Anything that maintains sort of temporal coherence in video using artificial intelligence is generally going to be something that I think is going to be used very heavily throughout the next 6 months, a year, of people that... It's great for people that want to tell short stories too, because you can generate, you can prompt sort of temporally coherent videos using artificial intelligence. It's not just still images. And I think that's sort of where a lot of new creativity is going to come from. Not just these big budget films, but it's going to be more accessible cost-wise as well to smaller filmmakers, which I think is only a powerful thing.
Yeah, I think AI does have the opportunity to democratize this sort of thing in filmmaking. We've got a question in about this idea of de-aging famous actors. It's an incredible tech, but is it going to deny lesser-known talent? Oh, that's a good question. Do you think we'll just be stuck with Tom Hanks for the next 30 years, just doing different things? Today he's in a spaceship, tomorrow he's a vet, and then next year he's in a hospital. Or do we still get the new actors coming through? Will they have different skills?
No, I think absolutely you will. I think it's a technology that will, because of the orders of magnitude in terms of cost and production time, makes it more accessible to more films. It's not just large Hollywood production studios that can do it. Independent filmmaker can't make an Avengers level film with those VFX budgets that we're talking about. It's just total out of the ballpark. But this technology will become so much more accessible to people. You'll have more roles for people to be able to step into, and there'll be more ability for people to step into roles that they otherwise wouldn't have had the chance to do because the film can go ahead conceptually. But also, I think existing actors, you can expand on your repertoire of, like you said, you're a vet next week or whatever, because you have this catalog of age ranges that you could play through the power of AI, these different stories that you can tell as a performer. I think it's just only going to empower that even more. So I don't think there's any, going to be a downside. I mean, you've swapped the faces of stunt actors and people like that for years. It's a similar concept. But I think that's just only going to widen the pool rather than, make it smaller.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. I know we've only got sort of 4 or 5 minutes left of this session, team, so if you've got any questions, please keep them coming in to Slido. I'm trying to read a few of these out. I think we did briefly touch upon ethics, and there was an ethics question on there, and I'm involved with a lot of AI for Good initiatives, including ones with the United Nations. I would love to chat a little bit about the wider sort of future of AI and creativity. I truly believe that as creative people, we're going to grab any tool and play with it. So I'd like to ask you a little about what were your moments of whoa when you've done Mandalorian, say, or when you did ABBA Voyage. Were there points where you thought that's the thing that's going to change everything?
Well, I think it's this real paradigm shift now with AI from traditional VFX. I think that's the fundamental change. Like I said, you've got 2 years of upfront asset work on a photoreal human that looks 95% there, that you're still missing that last bit.
Yeah.
And then you train these models for 2 months, maybe less, and you get an image out that you just buy.
Yeah.
And it's just that orders of magnitude difference. But yeah, I think in terms of the ethics of it, I think I'm a real AI optimist as well. I think it's amazing giving people the tools to be able to create more and to create more powerfully is only a good thing. I think, you look back when the photography was invented and the first cameras went out, people thought it's the death of art. It wasn't. It was just a whole new avenue. There were still artists now, and there are photographers now. Video as well. These sort of paradigm shifts of media creation, I think, only further advance human creativity as well, because there are humans. There's an art to doing this that is sort of very human-driven as well.
Just to clarify, we've had a question saying, does the AI only swap actors' faces, or can you change their body shape? Can you put on weight or remove weight? Asking for a friend. Yeah, no, I mean, that's a very real thing, right? You've got a 60-year-old person who looks young in the face, but has wrinkly hands and sort of sallowed skin as you do as you get older. That's a very real problem to solve as well. Luckily, those things right now are relatively easily achievable with traditional de-aging methods as opposed to the face, which is a very different experience. But things like the necks, for example, we train models on necks.
and we do a lot of de-aging on necks
Keep touching myself, worrying about different nose, now the neck,
exactly,
the hands.
All your different features that drop and droop and get wrinkle over time. You create very harsh features as you get older. Beautiful features, but they get much deeper. Your wrinkles get much deeper. So there's that side of things that we have to kind of pull out as well. So we do the face and we do the neck as well, and that's just going to further expand to the body. In like I said, you can swap clothing as well, so you can do body, you can do body replacements and change body.
Do everything.
Yeah.
I mean, part of me thinks maybe society should be happier with us lot getting older and maturing, and there is this kind of interesting situation, I think, which might arise where we have this sort of impossible, perfectly de-aged actors, and maybe there'll be this sort of resurgence for interest and flaws.
But it's not just de-aging as well. You can age people as well with this. You can push someone up as opposed to down. It's not just all down. So up's good as well.
Up's good as well. I think we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much. Chris Smith of Metaphysic, everybody. Wow.
Thanks very much.
It's a real insight into the future. I've been LJ Rich, real one, not an avatar, wrinkles and all. And stay tuned, audience. In about 5 minutes or so, we're going to be talking to TikTok. So 300 seconds, I'll see you back here. Thank you very much for your time and attention.